Hello, welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a beautiful Thursday evening in April 2023. It was a near perfect day for working. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold. It might have nudged 60 degrees. Now it's a wonderful evening. I'm out here in the shop working on my list of repairs on the Street 55 Chevy. Last night I finished the traction bars, the install. That went pretty well. I welded up the perches, which I'll show you, and hand assembled everything. Had to use a C-clamp to get the little U-bolts in the front that keep the tension on the front of the traction bars. Set the whole mess down on a couple jack stands so I could finish tightening the U-bolts. Everything looked good. Back up in the air, and I used my Mac Tools ratchet, 1/2-inch drive. It's a nice ratchet. Let me get it. Here it is. Powering my snap-on deep impact socket that I bought in high school. I have polished it shiny just with my hand using it. No complaints about the snap-on tools that I bought back in the 80s. But this Mac ratchet is the line in the sand where I stopped buying from the tool trucks. It looked really nice. It functions just fine. The box said made in Taiwan. Mac Tools, made in Taiwan. I said, that's it. I might as well go to Harbor Freight or Sears. Name a store, Lowe's, whatever. So every time I grab this, it reminds me that all is not as it seems. It used to be, but it wasn't. This was probably right around the year 2000 when I bought that, maybe a little bit later, but that was the end of it. So I'll show you the rear end install, if you will, then we'll move on to the next problem. The traction bars are installed. I snugged up the U-bolts and set the rear down on jack stands on the floor and tightened them up that way. After I had taken a C-clamp and started these nuts, and I found some shock studs, used but nice, that are they have a 1/2-inch bolt here, most of 5/8, and had to drill the hole out a little bit, but that works out pretty good. It has air shocks on it temporarily. I let the air out and they'll function as a shock until such time they go away. The parking brake, shall I say the non-functional parking brake, on a Tri-5 Chevy, there's a handle under the dash. The cable, the upper cable, runs through a bunch of wheels like a clothesline down to this. This was perfectly straight when I started. This crude bracket, it has a notch that fits into a sheet metal bracket. It sticks through another bracket on an angle. And when you pull the upper cable, it pulls on the rear parking brakes. The rear parking brake cables make a U, and the upper cable just pulls on the lever. This rubs on the drive shaft. It only has a 2.5-inch drive shaft. I haven't actually measured it, but that's my guess. So I thought, with a little bit of bending, I could improve my clearance on the drive shaft, and maybe by moving a few holes around, get some more leverage out of it. There were some pre-drilled holes, and I ended up breaking it right there. I made too sharp a bend anyway. I tried to make it, 90 degrees on each bend, and that did not work. So now I just had a blueprint of how to cut the notch. I went back to my dumpster steel that still makes me happy every time I use a piece because it's all marked in crayon. I just drove by the place over by the airport where I bought all this steel. Well, where all the steel came from, I bought it out of a dumpster a few towns away. Anyway, so it's not quite an inch. It's more than 7/8 width. It's 1/4 inch thick. I was much more gentle on my bends. Cut the notch, just cut a couple of holes, and now I'm going to go install it. And I think this and a rear brake adjustment. The rear brakes have broken in. They're all brand new, and they need to be readjusted. And one of the biggest problems I see is I have not done any research. I have the factory assembly manual for a Tri-5 Chevy, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it my own way. If you look at a Camaro, Nova, Chevelle, the rear, there's a mid cable on those. You know, you got your two emergency brake cables coming out of the brake drums that hook to the frame, and then there's a mid cable. That mid cable hooks to the upper cable that pulls on it. Then it has a pivot point over here and two more pivot points. They're just a piece of steel with hooks in them, hooked into the frame. Now I'm looking at the frame on the 55. There's two holes that I can use if I bend up a couple of cable guides, if you will. So when you pull on this, it's not just pulling straight on the cables up over the mufflers. I think I can improve the whole thing. My goal is to be able, before I hook up the upper cable, I should be able to apply the parking brake just by pulling on this 2 or 3 inches. So that's my plan. I had to go out and run a few errands this afternoon, so I swung by my local hardware store and picked up some rod. This one's been in the rack since Christ was a cowboy. Recently, the price has been updated, I see. I mean, that's $6.49. The 5/16 rod, $5.99. It is shorter, but thicker. And the 3/8 rod, $7.99 for 36 inches. I don't know if I'm gonna make these guides out of the 1/4 or the 5/16. The 3/8 is because I know I just used my last piece the other day. Well, this is how much I got left. It's handy for making handles and stuff, so it is what it is. I prefer the non-plated stuff, but sometimes you can't be fussy. So this neat little bench followed me home today. I've been cleaning in the shop and I've uncovered almost as much room, so let's fill it up. Seriously though, I think, for the money, it was really cheap, I can make something out of it. Let's unload it. I wasn't expecting to bring home a bench. Fortunately, I had the truck. But all I had for straps under the seat were these two. This piece of junk's too short. So the guy gave me a new strap and told me to keep it. I'll put that under the seat for next time. Here it is on the ground. It's got very few features, but I think I can work with it. This piece is crudely welded, but the rest of the welding on it's fine. The top has a few spots where people have missed with the cutting torch, but I think I'll weld those up and grind them down. Same with what I assume is the front, because it has a small overhang where the back doesn't. But it's going to be on wheels. It is on wheels, so I'll weld some of these saw marks up. The rest of the top's pretty decent. I believe it's 3/8. And none of the casters locked, but I have different ones if I had to. You know, had the need to make it stop rolling. And I believe I'm going to use these openings in the square tubing that runs underneath. You know, for vices and stuff like that. Have a slip-in rig there, so I'll probably have to make a slightly smaller receiver, or excuse me, the actual male portion. Let me go get one and try it. Well, my eyes told me it was the same size, and it is. So maybe if I'm going to have any slide-in features that would only fit this bench, would not be ideal. However, I could add some receivers over here. I don't want to have a lot of leverage and hang something on there that could tip the bench over, but we'll see. I'm getting ahead of myself. So it doesn't take me long to take a project completely out of hand. As it sits right now, the bench is handy. It rolls around nicely. It's not too heavy. You can't pick up one end to go over, you know, the hump going outside or inside, back inside. My first thought, well, second thought, other than attaching vices and all kinds of attachments to it, was to fill in the bottom with I have a piece of diamond plate outside. Maybe make 2 or 3 tiers so you could really stack it with scrap metal. By the time I'm done, it won't be portable anymore. Why don't I just clean it up the way it is? And I can always add stuff on later. But just use it as a mobile bench, which is why I bought it. This is an example of what I made. This end hooked into the frame, and the emergency brake cable goes through here. This one was too short, so let's call it a prototype. It took some adjusting and finagling, but I technically clear the drive shaft now. And the parking brake actually works. I'm blinding myself with the light here. It gets really close right there. You can see where it's hitting the past. Again, the rear end's hanging down right now, so. But as far as the rest of it, it does clear the drive shaft. And here I would have room for a bigger shaft. And these worked out pretty good. 8 inches seemed to be the magic trick. The muffler's kind of in the way, but that's not uncommon. But again, the parking brake actually works now. The first time I parked the old 55 in the garage, it dripped oil, both under the engine and under the rear end, right in the middle. Now, the anatomy of a leak. You might think the rear end's leaking, but then you study it a little more, and there's oil way out on the housing end on both sides. It's not coming from here. There's oil stuck to the bottom of the brand new transmission and bell housing, but it's not coming from here. There's a mist of oil, an actual drop of oil on the oil filter, and it's just been changed before I got it. But if you look way up, if you can see it, if I can show it to you, it's the back of the valve covers running down on both sides. It builds up down here on the transmission, and the wind takes it back to the rear end. So if I fix the valve covers, it should fix my leak. But while looking for the oil leak, I ran across this mess. The bolt is bent. The whole motor mount's hanging unsupported, half of it. The engine's gonna fall right out of the car. These are the bolt-on mounts. And I've seen people have some trouble getting the engine in and out, and this is not gonna fly. It's the same on both sides. It looks like about a grade 2 bolt. Regardless, it's bent. And it has stock rubber engine mounts. Those don't belong in any performance vehicle anyway. You at least need a poly mount. So now the project is escalating a little bit. And the cheap ball joints that are in the cheap A-arms, even if they're a QA1, I don't know what they are. I shouldn't say they're cheap, but I don't know. But the ball joint boots are cracked on both sides. And the ball joints look pretty dry. So before they go bad, I got to take the front end apart and put new seals on the ball joints. No big deal, just more work. Look at the bolt on the passenger side. It is bent. It's not coming out through the hole, I guarantee you. I'll remove the mounts, jack the motor up, remove the mounts. Weld on new pieces that fit. I mean, the whole mount is squished, the bolt's so tight, but unreal. Many times while riding on my bike, a bee or hornet has gone into my jacket. Well, this one got stuck in the pulley and it's still there. I've mentioned many times about using smooth ID hose clamps on hoses that matter. This power steering hose is chewed halfway through with a worm style clamp. If you have worm style clamps, throw them in the trash. This is what happens. Now, I got to make a big mess fixing this hose. It's going to drain the whole power steering reservoir. Unless I'm really crafty. In this picture, the fuel line lays on the lower radiator hose. Not exactly great for performance, but further up, there's a worm drive hose clamp on the fuel line. That's even worse when that lets go. So I got a little more work to do. No big deal. I probably should have started this about a month ago, but the lift was tied up, and I am lucky I found this window of opportunity to make a few repairs. You know, some people claim that mechanics don't like to work on their own cars. I don't find that true at all. I love everything I'm fixing, like having a working parking brake. You get to reap the benefits of it and feel good about yourself every time you enjoy whatever it is you fixed. I've always enjoyed working on my own stuff and getting to use it afterwards. The downside is, when it's your own vehicle, you don't want to always take the time to do it because you want to be out using it, but sometimes you have no choice. And if you overlook stuff, that's probably going to be a regret. So just got to take the time to fix it right now. And it's expected on any build. If I had built the car, it's very possible 4,000 miles later when you look at it, some things break, some things move. I'm always surprised at how flexible the Tri-5 Chevys are. This is a hardtop, it's not a post, which I think makes it weaker. I know the convertibles as well had a special frame, but the car sitting on the ground, the doors work flawless. You can close them with your finger. Sitting on the lift, the doors, or at least the driver's door, doesn't work like it does normally. So it's a full frame car. The lift is, the front and rear axles hanging, but it definitely is affecting the body. I know it's pretty common, when you make a race car out of a Tri-5, the windows fall out and everything else because everything's pretty flexible. So, and the design of how they're installed, but there won't be any trouble with the Race 55 because that chassis is not going to flex. Well, you never know. Anyway, have a good night, and we'll just keep working toward the end goal of hopefully driving it next week. We'll see. And the bench, that just kind of followed me home. And if I don't, shoot myself in the foot by making the thing so heavy it won't move, I can enjoy being able to have a portable bench, kind of like a portable toolbox. That's the concept. Most toolboxes I get them so full and they're so big you can't move them around to the job. Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. Have a good evening.